Hello everyone and welcome to another video. Do you know what becomes really hard when you suddenly get a full-time job or you suddenly start full-time university and you don't have abundant amounts of time to do whatever you want? Reading. Reading gets really hard. About a month and a bit ago, I realized that I had only read 2 fiction books for the whole of 2019 so far. Just 2. And while I've read a number of academic texts and fairy tales and myths and all the stuff I've been reading for my university course, I have only read 2 proper books this year. Normally, I read about 20 books in a year, and given that I had only read 2 books between the months of January and May, that was not something that was going to be likely to happen in 2019. Now, I wish I read more than 20 books a year, but honestly, 20 is like a realistic number for me, the amount of reading I do. And I was just flabbergasted at how little I had actually read. So I started looking into ways I could increase my reading and encourage myself to read, not because reading is something I should do, but because reading is something I love. This is a video for people who just want to encourage themselves to read or try to read a bit more. There are no insane hacks here to increase velocity of reading. It's just, these are ways to encourage yourself to consume more books and spend more time reading because it's a really nice, happy, lovely thing to do. Anyway, without further ado, here are the 5 tips that helped me actually read more. Number 1, take a good look at all of the ways that you spend your time throughout the week and try to pick out the things that could be swapped out with reading. For me, I know that when I get home from work, there's a certain period of time before we organize dinner that I end up invariably spending like scrolling through Instagram or scrolling through Twitter or doing like the usual social media stuff. That's optimal time that I could be reading. So I've started trying to read during that period instead. It's just a sort of period of time where I've gotten home from work, I'm really tired and zonked out, and I just don't really want to think about anything. For me, social media isn't necessarily the most valuable thing for me to be doing. It doesn't necessarily make me happy. So I'm trying to do something that makes me a lot happier instead, which is reading. Not to mention, a lot of people encourage you to read right before bed. I always find that I fall asleep if I try to do this, so it's better for me to try to read when my brain is still alert rather than trying to shovel in an hour before I go to sleep, because I just end up falling asleep and it doesn't really work for me. This is not to say that you should fill every single second of your day with doing something. I don't agree with that at all. But at least for me, I know that social media doesn't really add value to my day. Like, I love going on YouTube and I love like checking up on you guys and doing all that kind of stuff. But excessive scrolling through Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, that's not something that makes me happy. But reading makes me happy. So I would much rather come home and force myself to read and get into that habit of doing something that, for me at least, is a lot more beneficial. Social media is very easy to scroll through because it's optimized to keep your attention. Books aren't optimized to keep your attention, but at least in my opinion, they're a lot more fulfilling overall. Number 2, borrow from the library. I cannot stress enough how brilliant the library is, and I feel like adults aren't encouraged enough to go to the library. Like, it's something that was very front of mind when I was a child, but for a little bit there, I sort of stopped going, and now I'm obsessed with the library and I love it so much. The reason why going to the library helps me read more is because I can consume the volume of books that I want without having to actually pay for it. Of course, your taxes are paying for the library, so like you are paying for it, but you don't have to like actually go and buy anything. I don't believe that you have to spend a lot of money to be a reader and to read a lot of books. For example, you can also go to secondhand stores and buy secondhand books, which is also brilliant for the environment. It's much less wasteful than buying something, not liking it, not reading it, and then just keeping it or like throwing it out. The thought of throwing a book in the bin is like absolute heresy. If you don't like a book, please just donate it. But if you're borrowing from the library, you don't have to think about it. If you don't like the book, you return it. Not to mention, you have shorter periods of time in which to read the books. Honestly, nothing makes me finish a book faster than getting that email that says, your book is due a week from now. I have finished so many books in that teeny tiny period of time just because I've had something there to actually physically encourage me. Number 3, taking an ebook reader with you wherever you go. Now, a lot of people say that you're supposed to take a book with you wherever you go, but I don't really like doing that because if I have a book from the library, I don't want to damage it. If I have my own book, I don't want to damage it. And if I have something in my bag all the time, I'm clumsy, I will spill things on it and it will get very tattered and that will make me very sad. So I don't like bringing physical books around with me everywhere, but I like bringing my Kindle around with me because it's very, very small, it's very thin, and you can just chuck it in your bag all the time and not even think about it. So that when you're waiting at like the doctor's, or your friend is 20 minutes late, or something unexpected happened and you haven't planned to read, but suddenly you have more time, it means that you have something there physically ready to go. I'm sorry if you can hear my washing machine, it's going off at the moment. And not to mention, it's much, much cheaper to buy things on an e-reader. For example, if you're getting books that are out of copyright because they're over 75 years old, they're sometimes free. So there's a lot of like Shakespeare on Kindles that are really cheap. I think I bought the complete collection of Virginia Woolf for like $3 or something like that. I bought like the whole collection of all the Bronte sisters, I think for like $1. Super duper duper cheap, and it means that you always have something there ready to read. Number 4, DNF. If you are not enjoying a book, do not finish it. Honestly, I feel like we put a lot of pressure on ourselves to always finish all the books forever and ever. If you're not enjoying a book, and especially if it's a very long book, don't finish it. No one is sitting there pressuring you, telling you that you have to finish things that you're not enjoying. And this is another reason why I don't always love buying the books. Like, I'd rather go to the library, or I'd rather like get something secondhand, because if I don't want to read it, I am not going to force myself to finish it. Like, if you're a very busy person, say you work full time, you're a student, you're a parent, something like that, you're not going to have abundant amounts of time for reading. And if you're reading a book and you hate it and it's boring, that is such a waste of your time to push yourself through it. At least for me, if I'm not enjoying a book and I'm struggling and pushing myself through it, that massively slows down my reading. I don't read multiple books at the same time. I like to read one book at a time, unless they're on different platforms. Like, I can read one on my Kindle and I'll read like one physical book. But if I'm not enjoying a book, it massively slows down my reading time. A really, really good book that grabs your attention isn't going to be a chore to read. It'll be really enjoyable to read. So if you're not enjoying a book, don't finish it. Number 5, this is the massive one that's helped me increase the amount that I'm reading. Listening to audiobooks. Oh my god, I have started reading so much more because of audiobooks. I really believe in like being physically active, and I think it's really good for your brain and really healthy, so I do a lot of walking. And I realized that instead of listening to music, I could be listening to audiobooks and I could be reading while I walk. Now, some people are in the camp that audiobooks don't count as reading, which I don't agree with at all, because not everyone has the ability to read a physical book. So I don't think it's right to discount audiobooks as reading. Like, you're still listening, you're still consuming, you're consuming books, it's still valid. The thing that stopped me was that I was always a little bit too stingy to pay for a subscription for audiobooks. Like I was always a student, and I could never really justify spending money on books that way. It never really struck a chord with me. But I recently found an app on my phone which has free audiobooks which you can just listen to. The app is literally just called Audiobooks. I don't know if they have it on iOS, but they certainly have it on Android, and essentially it's an app where volunteers have read out books that are royalty free. So books like Frankenstein or Anne of Green Gables or Shakespeare or Wuthering Heights, or any like really old books. There are advertisements, of course, on the apps. The developers have to make money somehow, but like aside from that, you don't have to pay for this app at all, and you just get complete access to boatloads of royalty-free books, and it is so brilliant. I'm not gonna lie, some of the quality does differ a little bit. Like, some of the recording quality isn't nearly as good as what a paid site is gonna be like, but essentially, overall, it's a brilliant app, and I have listened to it so much. This isn't sponsored, by the way. I found this organically. I just really, really like it, and it's helped me read so much more. If I'm using this app and I'm listening to like one good big-sized audiobook, it'll take me about a week to finish it. That's a week of me walking and just like going about my day, or like cleaning, or doing boring repetitive stuff that I otherwise wouldn't have really been doing anything anyway. So it's not dedicated time that I've taken out to read, but it's just me doing my normal tasks. And so I can read an extra book a week while just doing regular stuff, and it is so very brilliant, and I love it. So those are my 5 tips on how to read more, or at least the 5 tips that helped me massively increase the amount I was reading and pull me out of my reading slump that I've been in for like the whole of 2019 so far. If you have any tips on reading and how to read more and how to pull yourself out of reading slumps, please let me know. I would love to hear them. They're probably going to be really, really useful to me as well, so please let me know. And yeah, I hope you liked the video. Take care and have an absolutely wonderful week. Bye.